Hello, everyone. In the late 1990s, when comic book movies were still considered risky experiments rather than billion-dollar franchises, there existed a project so ambitious, so strange, and so cursed that it became Hollywood legend, Superman Lives, the movie that was supposed to redefine the superhero genre, directed by Tim Burton and starring Nicolas Cage as the Man of Steel. For years, fans wondered why a film with such talent, a massive budget, and a visionary creative team was abruptly canceled after millions had already been spent on costumes, scripts, and pre-production. But now, decades later, Tim Burton has finally broken his silence, and his explanation paints a grim picture of corporate fear, Hollywood hypocrisy, and a creative system that eats its own visionaries alive. Burton's version of Superman was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. After the success of Batman and Batman Returns, Warner Brothers turned to him again to resurrect Superman, whose cinematic image had died with the tragic downfall of Christopher Reeve's sequels. But Burton didn't want to make a conventional superhero movie. His Superman was an outsider, a lonely alien caught between worlds, more gothic than patriotic, more misunderstood than messianic. He envisioned a story called Superman Lives, based loosely on the famous Death of Superman comic arc, in which the Man of Steel would die at the hands of Doomsday and be reborn in a bizarre emotional resurrection sequence that would explore what it truly means to be human. Nicolas Cage, already known for his eccentric intensity, was perfectly cast for Burton's surreal vision. Costume tests were completed, glowing biosuits, long hair, shimmering alien fabrics, and Cage fully immersed himself in the psychology of an alien god forced to live among mortals. Kevin Smith, who had written an early draft, described the film as insane but inspired. Giant spiders, alien tech, and Brainiac teaming up with Lex Luthor. The studio seemed on board until they weren't. Over the years, rumors swirled, budget problems, creative clashes, and executives losing faith in Burton's eccentricity. But when Tim Burton finally spoke candidly about it, the truth was uglier. According to him, the movie wasn't canceled because it wouldn't have worked. It was canceled because the people in charge didn't understand it. Warner Brothers, still reeling from the failure of Batman and Robin, was terrified of another superhero flop. The studio began interfering early, pushing Burton to make Superman more marketable, more kid-friendly, more like a toy line than a mythic figure. They didn't want Superman the alien. They wanted Superman the brand. And that, Burton explained, was the death blow. He recalled endless studio meetings filled with executives who had no connection to the source material but endless opinions about it. Superman shouldn't wear black. Superman shouldn't die. Superman shouldn't make people think too much. The same studio that had once trusted Burton's weird genius for Batman now saw him as a liability. His dark tone, his artistic freedom, his fascination with misfits, they wanted none of it. And yet, millions of dollars were already spent. Sets were being built, visual effects tested, and costume designers like Colleen Atwood had already created some of the most striking superhero imagery ever conceived. But with every week, the studio's anxiety grew. Burton's Superman was simply too strange, too emotional, too uncommercial for a corporate climate obsessed with control. Then came the final straw. Nicolas Cage's casting became a punchline in Hollywood circles. Before the internet, gossip columns mocked the idea of Cage as Superman. Too odd, too neurotic, too unlike the square-jawed hero America was used to. The executives panicked. Rather than trusting Burton's boldness, they pulled the plug. But what makes Burton's recent comments so haunting is his realization that Superman Lives wasn't just one lost movie. It was a symbol of a larger creative rot in Hollywood. He said it bluntly, Studios don't want artists, they want algorithms. He compared the 1990s studio system to today's superhero machine, where filmmakers are forced to conform to a cinematic universe rather than create something truly original. He said the same mentality that killed Superman lives is what now makes every superhero movie feel identical, committee-driven, focus-tested, and lifeless. And perhaps the most painful part is that Burton poured his soul into a film that was murdered not by failure, but by fear. He described leaving the project as a kind of heartbreak, saying that every time he sees modern superhero movies, he's reminded of what could have been. A Superman who wasn't a flawless savior, but a tragic alien trying to belong. The leaked costume tests went viral, and fans suddenly realized how ahead of its time Superman Lives really was. The glowing Kryptonian suit looked like something out of a modern-day sci-fi epic, and Cage's melancholic expression captured exactly the kind of tortured hero we'd later see in Man of Steel and the Batman. It was almost prophetic, and yet the world never got to see it. Burton's revelation adds a new layer of sadness to the story, especially when you consider how close it came to being made. He said there was real momentum, set construction, creature design, even test shoots, but overnight it was gone. Warner Brothers quietly buried the project, reassigned the crew, and pretended it never happened. For Burton, that was the moment he realized how disposable creativity had become. In his words, Hollywood only wants safe weirdness, a version of art that looks strange but never challenges anything. Superman Lives would have challenged everything. The idea of heroism, masculinity, alienation, even death itself. It would have forced audiences to confront the mortality of gods. Instead, what we got were decades of interchangeable superheroes. The bitter irony, as Burton now points out, is that Superman Lives might have changed the course of comic book movies forever had it been made. It could have paved the way for films like The Dark Knight or Logan years earlier. But the system wasn't ready for that. They wanted control, not creativity. And so, Superman Lives became the ultimate Hollywood ghost. A dream project that embodied everything right and wrong about the industry. Nicolas Cage has since spoken about it too, calling it a beautiful failure, a movie that died before it had a chance to live. He said working with Burton would have been a career highlight, and even though the film was never made, he still considers himself lucky to have been part of something that people still talk about nearly 30 years later. But for Tim Burton, the wound runs deeper. When he finally talked about it, you could sense the frustration that still lingers, the feeling that something truly original was stolen by bureaucracy. In the end, Superman Lives wasn't just canceled, it was sacrificed. Sacrificed to fear, to control, and to the corporate belief that audiences can't handle risk. Burton's final words on the matter are chilling. He said, "They didn't kill Superman, they killed imagination." And maybe that's the real tragedy, because Superman Lives would have been more than just a movie. It would have been a statement, a challenge to the industry, a reminder that art doesn't have to be safe to be meaningful. Now, all we have are fragments, test footage, concept art, and a haunting sense of what might have been. But as Burton's revelation reminds us, the death of Superman Lives wasn't just the end of a film. It was the beginning of Hollywood's slow surrender to mediocrity. Thanks for watching.